This is Mending Mahogany. Thanks for tuning into my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you have had a wonderful day. In the words of Ice Cube, today was a good day. Today I am celebrating my 24th wedding anniversary. And it's nothing that me or Rod have done. I'll tell you, it's all God. It is all God that we have come this far. But I do thank him for keeping us together, keeping our union together, and keeping our family together. And today, as I was thinking, I wanted to discuss being careful not to take on someone else's fear as your own. And how do I relate that to my anniversary? Well, the backdrop of my story, if you missed my video on domestic violence, I got pregnant at 19. I had a child at 20. Me and my son's father did not work out. He decided after I had the baby that, that's not what he wanted. And basically he bounced. So I was a young, unwed, single mother at the age of 20. And I believe the abandonment from my son's father set me up to, in turn, be in a domestic violence relationship. That was the next relationship that I was in after the relationship with my son's father. And it lasted about 4.5 years. But, I had always heard the running lie in my family. I don't know where it originated from. I don't know who said it, but it was an undercurrent, and it was something that I had heard, that men do not want ready-made families. So here I was, a single mother, and I felt like, this guy wanted to be with me, and I had a son, so therefore I had to put up with any type of behavior that he was dishing out, because I already had a child and no man wanted a ready-made family. Well, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Each man is an individual. Of course, there are probably men in the world that don't want a ready-made family, but that's not everyone's story, and every man cannot be judged by that statement. So I was a single mother for 5 years before I met my husband, and we were married when my son was 5, and my son is now 30. We have 2 children of our own together. And I allowed things that my family said to make me think that I was making the wrong decision when I was marrying Rodney. I recall statements like, girl, you better make sure he's saved. He gonna marry you, and then he gonna dump you and go back out in the world, and you're gonna be stuck at church on the altar crying and praying for him. He's gonna go back out into the streets. And we have to be sure that when we take advice from people, no matter who these people are, that it's coming from a place of wisdom and not from a wound. Because when people speak from their wounds, that's not wisdom. When you speak from a wound, you're speaking of a place of hurt. You're speaking of a place of fear. When you speak from wisdom, you're speaking of a healed place, a place that God has brought you from. And I felt like a lot of people were speaking and giving advice from their wounds, from places that they had been hurt. And because these were family members and people who had a lot of influence over me, I broke off the engagement with my husband, and we were apart for about 6 months. And it was really awkward because we was in the same church. I was the worship leader, he was the drummer. And I used to think he would purposely play slow just to get me off beat. But it was just a very awkward time. But, God spoke to me in that time that we were apart and let me know that I was making the right decision. And God spoke to him in that time that we were apart, because he needed some heart work done himself. God wanted to be sure that God was first and not me. And in that time apart, we sought God separately, and God brought us together collectively. And on November 14th, 1998, we did get married. And was the goal to marry a pastor? Absolutely not. He wasn't a pastor when we got married. He's only been a pastor about almost 8 years. But any place that we were in, we were always in leadership. You know, we were ordained as ministers. And I have not been to a lot of churches in my life. As I said, my family built a church, so we were in leadership there. And then we went to another church where we were in leadership. And now we are at the church that we are at now, Abundant Life. We've been there for, this spring will be 15 years. So every place we've been, we've always been in leadership. The goal was not to marry a pastor, like I said, but in us serving God together, he has made room for our gifts. And he just so happened to now be a pastor at the church. But when God brings people together, he brings people together for purpose, for kingdom purpose. It's more than you getting a house with a 2-car garage and 2 kids and a dog. God brings people together for purpose, for kingdom. So I believe that, that's something that's very important, that, we as women and men, if you're listening, to keep that in mind. God has a purpose when he brings 2 people together. And it's not to travel the world and build up riches and get a big house and, have all of these fancy cars. It's about the upbuilding of his kingdom. And I believe that that is the main reason why people are brought together in union, because God wants to use your life, your union, to bless the kingdom. But that's all I have to say. If I could leave one nugget of wisdom, don't let people put their fears on you. Because in them putting their fears on you, you can miss out on an opportunity, an open door that God has for you to walk through. So when you meet somebody, of course, you're bringing them around people that care for you and, people that can maybe judge his character. Sometimes people see what we don't see, but the main thing is you bring that before the Lord and you sit before the Lord, because you cannot have pastors and prophets and family members telling you who you should and should not marry, because at the end of the day, that is going to be your decision, but it's going to be a decision that does not need to be made lightly, and definitely a decision that God's blessing is on. So thank you for tuning in. This is Mending Mahogany. Please make sure you hit the like button. Please share the video, and please comment on this video and tell me what your take is on love and relationships. Because when we come on to God's side, our perspective of love and relationships is totally different, because this is a totally different way of living when we're living for God than when we're dating out in the world and being led by our emotions, being led by physical attraction, being led by sex. I'm not saying that sex isn't an important thing in marriage. Of course, it's very important. But more than sex, it's said that men want respect. And, men want to be respected by the women in their lives. And that's something that I had to learn, because I had made an inner vow from being in past relationships that were not good and seeing certain things that went on in my family. And I had made an inner vow, like, that will never, ain't nobody gonna ever do this, and I will not. And it took the power of God in tearing down strongholds in my life to break those inner vows. Because when you make inner vows, they are not always good. Sometimes they can be a hindrance to what God wants to do in our life. So thanks for taking the time to listen to what I had to say, and have a wonderful evening. Once again, this is Mending Mahogany. Thanks for tuning in.